People still describe Abu Dhabi as a slow market, and whenever I hear this, it immediately tells me something very important. It tells me that the person making that statement is watching the market from the outside, rather than understanding what is actually happening inside developer allocations. Because if you were positioned correctly, if you were speaking directly to the developers, and if you were seeing the capital being placed before projects even go public, you would understand that Abu Dhabi is no longer slow, it's strategic. Noya Yas on Yas Island is a perfect example of this shift. It was not a 500-unit tower with a huge marketing campaign. It was a boutique release of just 96 residences, and it was fully absorbed in record time before most of the public even realised it had launched. Now that detail matters. This was not a hype-driven sellout. It was not fueled by social media noise or billboard campaigns. It was absorbed quietly and efficiently, which tells you something far more important than the headline itself. It tells you the capital was already waiting. When projects of this scale disappear quickly, it's rarely because of the advertising. It's because the right buyers were already educated, already pre-qualified, and already positioned with liquidity. That is the behaviour of a maturing market. There is a significant difference between large-scale supply and boutique inventory. Large-scale supply requires marketing momentum to create absorption. Boutique inventory requires access. When only 96 residences are being released in a controlled market, there's no room for hesitation. Developers are not looking for noise, they are looking for certainty. They prioritise brokers with serious clients. Brokers prioritise buyers who are ready to commit. And by the time the wider public sees the opportunity online, the best allocations are already gone. This is where many investors misunderstand what's happening in Abu Dhabi. They are waiting to see the projects on portals. They are waiting for mainstream visibility. But in controlled supply environment, positioning happens before visibility. That is how mature markets operate. To understand why this is happening now, you need to understand the evolution of Abu Dhabi's buyer profile. 5 or 6 years ago, Abu Dhabi was viewed as a stable, conservative, and sometimes even slow-moving. It was largely government-backed, heavily institutional, and not always as exciting for private capital growth. However, stability combined with infrastructure investment becomes extremely powerful over time. Over the past few years, there has been a quiet but meaningful shift. Executive relocations have increased, corporate registrations have grown, particularly within ADGM. Long-term residency reforms have strengthened buyer confidence. Infrastructure investment has expanded into lifestyle-led districts. These changes do not create headlines overnight, but they create structural confidence. Yas Island is perhaps the clearest example of this transformation. Yas Island is no longer simply known for entertainment and theme parks. It has evolved into a fully integrated lifestyle destination. It offers waterfront living, hospitality infrastructure, schools, retail, connectivity, all within a master-planned environment. This combination of lifestyle infrastructure, long-term planning, attracts a very specific type of buyer. It attracts end users, executives, and investors who are thinking in 5 or 10-year cycles, not quick flips. When that kind of buyer enters a controlled supply market, absorption becomes efficient. Another factor that cannot be ignored is Abu Dhabi's approach to land release. Unlike most volume-driven cities, Abu Dhabi does not flood the market with excessive inventory. Developers release in carefully structured phases. Land is not overexposed, supply is deliberate. This means that when a well-located, well-priced boutique project is introduced, scarcity immediately becomes a driver. Scarcity alone does not create demand. Scarcity paired with credibility does. Noya Yas was positioned correctly in terms of location, scale, and pricing. But more importantly, it was released into a market where serious capital was already monitoring opportunities. That is why it was absorbed quickly, not because of speculation, but because of preparedness. It is important here to distinguish between hype-driven sellouts and capital-driven sellouts. Hype-driven sellouts are loud. They rely on marketing theatrics, influencer campaigns, and retail excitement. Capital-driven sellouts are quiet. They happen through allocation lists, private viewings, and direct broker relationships. The latter is a far stronger signal of market maturity. If we compare this to Dubai's cycle, there are similarities, but there are also clear differences. Dubai went through a phase where strong launches would disappear rapidly, driven by aggressive capital inflows and global attention. Dubai's growth pattern is often momentum-based and visible. Abu Dhabi's growth pattern is more controlled and structural. Dubai accelerates, Abu Dhabi compounds. Both approaches can create value, but they operate differently. Controlled markets do not spike dramatically overnight. They reprice in steps. Each new successful launch creates a benchmark for the previous one. Each absorption event reinforces confidence. The buyer profile in Abu Dhabi has also evolved. Today there are significantly more end users entering the market. End users behave differently to short-term speculators. They do not panic sell. They are not driven by short-term volatility. They buy for lifestyle, security, and long-term positioning. This creates natural price floors within communities. When you combine end-user demand, executive relocation, controlled supply, and boutique-scale releases, you create a market environment where quality projects can disappear quickly without public noise. And that is the key takeaway. Noya Yas is not important simply because it was sold out. It's important because of how it was sold out. It was absorbed quietly, efficiently, and strategically. That tells us that Abu Dhabi is no longer waiting for demand to build. Demand is already here. It's just selective. For investors watching from abroad, particularly those who are used to a more visible market, this can be difficult to interpret. But in mature markets, the real opportunity exists before mainstream awareness. The difference between entering at launch pricing and entering after repricing can be a matter of weeks, not months. And in a boutique release with fewer than 100 units, the margin for hesitation is extremely small. So when someone describes Abu Dhabi as slow, the real question is, are they observing the market through advertising channels, or are they observing it through allocation channels? Because in strategic markets, access matters more than exposure, positioning matters more than publicity, and timing matters more than price. The investors who recognize this behavioral shift early are the ones who will benefit the most. Not because they chased momentum, because they understood maturity. Abu Dhabi is not becoming louder, it's becoming stronger. And that distinction is where real opportunity lies.